It is a really exciting time to be a photographer. The technology that we have, the advancements that are being made are incredible. Yet, we still tend to hang on to our old ways and resist change. Let's talk about lighting tonight and how we might want to start to change the way that we think about lighting. Stay tuned. Hey gang, I'm Joe Edelman and welcome to another live episode of The Last Frame. Thanks for tuning in. It's great to have you here, and you know the drill if you've been here before. If you're on YouTube, in the chat window, please drop in your name and where you're tuning in from. If you're on Facebook, in the comments, go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know that you're here and let me know where you're watching from. And for those of you that are on Facebook, up at the top of the live chat, if you're watching this live, there is a poll up there. And I got to be honest, I'm really surprised about the results. But do you primarily use natural light, flash, or LED? So far, we don't have a single person who's shooting primarily LED. I can't vote because I made the poll, so it won't let me weigh in. My answer would be LED. For those of you on Facebook, go ahead and just add it into the comments. What is your primary method of light that you use? And also for all of you, Facebook, YouTube, doesn't matter. I want to know what kind of struggles you have with lighting. In other words, things you have a hard time understanding, things that you seem to not be able to get right on a consistent basis. Let's solve some problems tonight. I don't have an agenda and a big, long, dissertation that I'm going to give you tonight. I want to try and plant the seeds for a little bit of a change in thinking. Honestly, that's my goal tonight, okay? So please do that. Check in, let me know. And of course, I'm going to do my darndest in the next 60 minutes to help you improve your photography. So interestingly enough, this was not my plan for today, but as it turned out, I had been asked to contribute an article to Petapixel, the photography blog. And I had written that article, over the course of the last 2 weeks. And it just so happened that it was published this afternoon. And it kind of fits in with the topic that I wanted to talk about tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over so that you folks can see the article in the chat on YouTube and also in Facebook. I am going to leave you with that link so that you can check it out and read it yourself. But do me a favor, read it later, okay? Because it's the kind of read that I really do hope you'll pay attention to, because it's a read that I think will help you a lot. And, in short, it overlaps what I want to talk about. We have this amazing technology that is being made available to us. And it's all the obvious things like digital technology, mirrorless cameras. We have EVFs, which are incredible, electronic viewfinders. So when you're shooting, what you see is what you get. You're seeing the finished image. AI technology, both in our cameras and in the editing and the culling software that we use, it's just off the charts. And one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is all the advancements that are happening in lighting. Now, if you guys remember, this is going back 4 years. I did a series of videos on YouTube. Jack, thank you so much. And let's see, do you have, I appreciate the super chat, Jack. Thank you very, very much. Going back 4 years, I did a series of videos about LED lights and essentially kind of raised the question, are LED lights ready for prime time? Meaning, were we at a point with the LED light technology that it made sense to stop using strobes and switch to LED lights? And at the time, I featured the specular lights from Spiffy Gear, which are the makers of the light that you see back there, which is actually modular. You can make that a light panel. You can make it squares, triangles, octagons, all that stuff. It's really great stuff. I also featured from Savage Universal, the Edgelit Pros, some single chip LED lights from Smith Victor. I'll make sure that I add the links to all of those videos in the description when we wrap up. But here's the thing. Basically, the short end of it is back then, I really liked what I was seeing with LEDs, especially what I consider to be more specialty lighting from Spiffy Gear and the Edgelit LED panels from Savage. Awesome light. But one of the things that was missing that photographers always talk about when we get to lighting is the power. Don't have enough power, in part because, gosh, you couldn't overpower the sun with those LEDs. I can't wait until that trend goes away. Just keeping it real, gang. Okay. And besides, if you haven't been paying attention since, if you're a trend follower, there's a whole new trend that's happening right now. In fact, I'm going to see if anybody, I'll leave it open to you guys in the chat. We'll see if anybody can nail what the trend is. And believe me, it's just starting because it's a little expensive to get in on the trend. You need a piece of gear that is available. It's only been on the market for a couple of weeks, but it's going to be a trend. All the YouTubers are jumping on it already. It'll be a trend. So maybe we'll get past the overpower the sun trend. But here's what's happening. And this is why I want to give all of you a nudge. And I see a couple of you already talking about the cost of lighting. And in fact, Don has probably the best response here. Honestly, I don't have the funds to keep changing my lighting. Is it really that important what type of light to use? Well, here's the thing, Don. The way you ask that question is very interesting. Is it really important what type of lighting you use? Yes, to you. Meaning, it's got to get the job done. So let me be really clear right up front, gang. I am not encouraging any of you to walk away from this live stream or finish reading that article and go out and spend more money on lighting. No, that's not my point. Actually, what I'm trying to do in the long run is save you money on lighting. So follow along and I'll explain, right? For years, strobes were pretty much the only game. And when I say for years, unfortunately, I'm old enough. I learned lighting in a photography studio where we used these big tungsten bulbs. They were literally about this long, and they literally were in silver reflectors, like the kind that we go to Home Depot and Lowe's and get now. That's the lighting that I learned with. And we wanted to diffuse them. We put a piece of diffusion paper wrapped over the front, taped on with masking tape. That was it. Okay. And then along came, potato masher strobes, which were the old Honeywell strobes on a handle. And then along came studio strobes and so on and so forth. And now, we have the Godox and the Elenchromes, and we have the FJ Westcotts, and of course the Pro Photos. And those are kind of the standards in the industry, shall we say, right? All great product. You're not going to hear me dump on any of them tonight, right? I'm not here to actually debate about gear. What I am here to do is hopefully kind of give you a bit of a wake-up call. And seriously, this is not to cause you stress to say, oh my God, I just bought this. I can't go buy more. No. But before you do buy more gear, lighting gear, it's time to start rethinking the way that we look at lighting. Keep in mind now, for probably 4-5 decades, strobes have been the name of the game in lighting. Completely made sense. No reason not to use them. It was simply a matter of which brand did you like back while we were still shooting film, which brand offered the best color quality, and which brand offered the power that you needed. The cameras are changing dramatically now. So what changes am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the fact that, number one, we're working with mirrorless. All the mirrorless cameras on the market have an EVF, except for the very few that don't have viewfinders at all, right? There's a couple. But mirrorless cameras work with an EVF. EVF, electronic viewfinder. What that means is, unlike a DSLR, where you are actually looking through the picture-taking lens, optically, you are now looking at a small television screen, very high resolution television screen that, because of the amazing computing power and processors that we have in our cameras, it's able to show you an image in real time, the image that the camera's going to record, the way that it's going to record it, right? How cool is that? I mean, that's really cool. So what that does for us as photographers, it gives us a WYSIWYG experience. WYSIWYG is actually a web development programming / coding term. What you see is what you get. So for those of you that are consistently like overexposing, underexposing your images, and you're shooting mirrorless, what are you doing? You're not paying attention, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, okay? So even Charlie here, the trend that I'm seeing is to try to convince me that I need to switch from DSLR to mirrorless. Charlie, here's the straight dope on switching from DSLR to mirrorless. Eventually, you're probably gonna. But is there an overwhelming reason for you to switch to mirrorless from DSLR? No one can say, yes, Charlie, there is. Unless you are saying, I'd really like to do this, and my DSLR won't do it. If there's a mirrorless camera that does do it, then yes, Charlie, you should be switching. But otherwise, no. So again, we're talking about lighting tonight, gang, right? That's the focus. Because lighting, whether you're using DSLRs or mirrorless, it's changing. It's evolving. And it's exciting. It literally is. So, I mean, number one, so you guys know, a lot of you guys know that I've been using these Stella Pro Lights, right? This is the CLX10. It's a 10,000 lumen light. These puppies are insanely bright. This is basically the size of a Godox AD200. The battery is built in it. It's even weatherproof. But the best part of this is, here is a small LED light that I can take on location. I can mount it in soft boxes. I can do all the things that I used to do with strobes, but I can do it WYSIWYG. Now I'm going to come back to that because, again, I'm not even pitching this light. I'm just saying, hey, that's what I'm using, okay? You know, as LED lights started to become popular, and when I say started to become popular, meaning we saw more and more of them for sale. You know, you'd see them at B&H and Adorama. You'd see them all over Amazon, all that kind of stuff. It was basically panels, whether it was a 12-inch by 12-inch or even bigger, where you had tons of the little LED chips in them. And the problem with those is that you can't modify them the same way that you modify a single light source, a single point light source, like you do a flash. So for me, one of the things when I finished that video series a couple years ago was I was waiting for an LED light that was bright enough, because the single chip ones that I did review from Smith Victor, they weren't bright enough. I wanted an LED light that was bright enough that I would be able to use in the same modifiers, the same soft boxes, the same beauty dishes, the same strip boxes as what I had been using strobes. I wanted that so that I didn't have to change the way that I think about how I modify my light. But why did I even care? I care because being able to do WYSIWYG lighting is just kind of an obvious choice. And it's an interesting evolution in the sense that lighting was WYSIWYG back in the 50s, back in the 60s. And then we went to flash because we needed the power and we needed control. And now we've come full circle because cameras have changed, where honestly WYSIWYG lighting makes so much more sense. Now look, let me be very clear also before somebody starts in with this other argument. I'm not trying to debate anyone. I'm just saying, gang, open your minds. Seriously. There's this thing called evolution, whether you like it or not, right? We all know how that worked out for the dinosaurs. Don't be a dinosaur. The industry's changing. Photography is changing. I am not saying that you need to stop today, turn the corner, and spend money. No, but you know what? Pay attention. Learn about it. Because what that does, here's what it does for you. And a couple of you have already typed in, well, I do this and I like this. You know what? Good for you. But man, you already have blinders on. You're like the little kid sitting in the corner going, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to hear it. And everything's going to pass you right by. And you know what? If you're okay with that, if you're doing your thing and you're not interested in expanding your horizons, then seriously, good for you. And that is your choice. But the fact of the matter is, if you are interested in growing as a photographer, and for me, I'm not saying you have to be like me, but I'm the kind of photographer, my mentality is the day that I stop learning, I'm done. Pack it in. It's over. It's the learning. It's the exploring. It's the experimenting. It's the creating new experiences. That's the stuff that excites me. That's the stuff that helps me be creative. That's what keeps photography interesting. I've been doing photography for almost 50 years. It's easy to get bored with something after that much time. I don't get bored because I value that change. I value that opportunity to create differently, to create new things, to see new things, experience new things, right? So again, I'm not pushing anybody, so you can all breathe, relax, but open your minds and pay attention. Because I hate to tell you, there are big changes coming. There are amazing pieces of technology that's shown up in the last couple of years. And there's even bigger pieces right around the corner. Okay? So again, with mirrorless cameras, with the WYSIWYG capabilities, it simply makes sense, right? It simply makes sense to be able to work with light where you see the light in real time. Now, the other element, though, that we really should be, and I firmly believe this, and I know that not all of you are going to agree, okay? I firmly believe, though, that there is value to photographers starting to step away from the mentality that you have to shoot everything at your base ISO to get the best quality. Now, let's put a pin in that point right there, because somebody should be ready to start typing really fast and say, but Joe, you've said you should always shoot at base ISO. Absolutely, I have said that. So what am I doing? On one hand, I'm saying you don't have to. On the other hand, I'm saying you should. Let's put it into context, because I'm not trying to game you. I'm not trying to change anything I said. But in photography, when we're talking about creativity especially, there is no one size fits all of anything. There's no one camera. Ajax, you're right. And I'll explain it. That's good. There's no one camera that does everything. I mean, Sony users know that better than anybody, right? They just do. There's no one camera that does everything. I know I'm going to get heat for that. There's no one light that does everything. There's no one modifier that does everything. There isn't, okay? So let's talk about that base ISO statement that I made. We know that every single digital camera essentially only has one ISO. There are several cameras now, primarily video type cameras, that have dual base ISOs. Like the Blackmagic camera that I'm using right now has 2 base ISOs, okay? Most of us are using cameras for our still work that has 1 base ISO. And we know that in bench tests and all that kind of stuff, the absolute best quality that that camera can produce is going to be at base ISO, because ISO isn't really a thing, gang. For those of you that still believe in the exposure triangle, you're kidding yourself. There is no exposure triangle. There hasn't been for a long time. And even when there was, the exposure triangle was nothing more than a memory technique. It didn't actually teach you a damn thing. It simply didn't. To be able to brag that you understand what the exposure triangle is just means that you're good at memorizing something. That's all it means for you. I swear to you. The way that you really learn about the elements on the exposure triangle is to learn their relationships. Okay? If you can't, in your head, really rapidly say, okay, ISO 100, 1/125th at f5.6, but I want to shoot at f2.8, what shutter speed do I go do? If you can't do that in your head, then you don't actually understand what's going on with the exposure triangle. You just don't. And I'm not saying that you actually have to, but please don't use that as your shield and, proud point. Okay. So the fact of the matter is we get the highest quality at that base ISO. However, there are other advancements that are happening. Those other advancements are the fact that camera companies are getting much, 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 much better at interpreting the higher ISOs and the higher sensitivity levels. I mean, heck, have you guys seen the announcement for the iPhone 13? My order's already in. In fact, for those of you that are interested in buying one, you can go to apple.com, and if you purchase with an Apple credit card, they'll let you do the whole order now. They'll take your credit card information, and on Friday morning, all you got to do is get up at 8 a.m. Eastern time and hit one button, and you're at the front of the line to get your phone. So you heard it from me. So anyway, my order's in. I mean, I haven't upgraded my phone I'm not getting it, because it's a cool new camera. I haven't upgraded my phone in three plus years now. But look at what that camera is able to do in low light situations. So the fact that, and obviously they're doing it with software. It's certainly not the sensor. It's a tiny little sensor, right? So what's happening, and Ajax, since you were the one that was going to call me out on it, is, the software is getting much, much better at handling higher ISO. It's time for us as photographers to understand that we can take advantage of that. Now, here's where you take my previous statements about shoot at your base ISO and my current statements of we can start to shoot at higher ISOs. I am in no way encouraging, shoot everything at ISO 400 or everything at ISO 800 and pay no attention to your ISOs. No. What I'm encouraging you is, here is the sentence. Shoot everything at the lowest ISO that you can. But don't be afraid to be shooting things at ISO 200 or 400 or 640 or even 800 if you're a full frame shooter. And I'm talking about the idea of being able to get incredibly clean, high resolution images. If you've been following me on Instagram, you've been seeing shots that I've been posting that are shot with LEDs at slightly higher ISOs and at slower shutter speeds also, which certainly requires paying attention. But remember, the reason why we shoot at a shutter speed of a 200th or a 250th a second, or some cameras at 1/60th of a second, that's because that's the sync speed for the flash. So why wouldn't you shoot at that speed? It just ensures you don't have any problems. But there's nowhere where it says you have to shoot at that speed, right? You just have to make sure you're shooting at a speed that is fast enough to stop any subject motion and fast enough to avoid any camera motion from you shaking the camera. So again, I know some of you're getting a headache from this, because what I'm pointing out is changing the way you think about how you choose your exposure settings, changing the way you think about how you're going to select your ISO. And is it making it harder? No, it's not making it harder. It's actually opening up more creative possibilities. By the way, what I'm suggesting, for all of you that live by the philosophy of why would I buy a 1.8 lens and not shoot at 1.8, for all of you that want to be able to shoot portraits with wickedly shallow depth of field, what I'm suggesting is the solution to doing that. Because working with a flash, it makes it much harder to do that. Much harder. Also, because cameras have the incredible amount of dynamic range that they have now, which film never had as much latitude. In the film days, what we call dynamic range now in digital, that was latitude, right? That was how many stops can you be over or underexposed and still have detail in the image and still have it look good. We've got cameras now that are 13, 15 or more stops of dynamic range. Back in the day, if you had a film type or film stock that had 2 stops of latitude, that was like amazing. So the other element here is that we have the ability to walk into a room, let's say, and I'll give you guys an example. I used it in the Petapixel article at the very end. If you've been to a wedding in the last year or two, there's a very high likelihood you have walked into a reception venue or a reception tent, and they had a DJ or a lighting company who lit that room up with all kinds of colored gels. In fact, here, I'll slide down. I'll show you the two examples that we had in the Petapixel article, okay? So these are not photographs that I took, but they illustrate the point, okay? It's very common to walk into a wedding venue today and see the venue all lit up with really, really colorful LEDs. Now, to our eyes, these lights are really cool and they're even kind of bright, but in reality, they're not bright at all. They're actually very dim and they're very low powered. They're LEDs. So the challenge that you have, if you're a photographer that relies entirely on strobes and you're going to work in a situation like that, you're not going to be able to light the room unless you actually add your own gels and literally relight the room, which if you think about that, why do that? Why relight what's already there, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to have a flash on camera or just off camera, which is the white light. But then your challenge is that flash, even at its lowest power, is going to be dramatically brighter than the surrounding lights. And in the case of the top picture, like for instance, where you've got, all the smoke in that, if that smoke starts getting closer to the light, it's just going to light up white and all the color gets washed out. And if you leave the power of your flash turned up and you expose for the bride and groom or the cake, you wind up with a really dark background, which we also know is really boring. And it kind of defeats the point behind why the bride and groom spent all of that money to get that wonderful color. Working with a lower powered LED to get your 5600K white light on your couple or on your cake allows you to super, super easily blend your subject with proper color balance and your environment, the ambient light, with all of the intense, cool color. It actually allows you to up your game faster, on the fly, in real time. And here's the best part, gang. You don't have to relearn lighting. You don't have to learn any physics, no squiggly lines, no alphabets in the mathematical equations, because you can see it. You can see it in real time, right? And the best part of it is, like in these wedding scenarios, the LED light that you're using on camera or just off camera, it doesn't have to be really bright. So it's not going to blind people. It's not like you're going to be walking around like a lighthouse in the middle of a wedding reception where everybody's like, oh my God, I wish that light would go away. No, you're using just enough light to separate your subjects from all that color. That's the beauty of it. And again, that's just one example, but it's an example, obviously, where we get to see all this intense color that's makes it really, really obvious. So again, let me stop. Let me pause for a moment. For all of you that I could tell were getting a little stressed in the beginning, I am not saying that you need to go buy LED lights today. No, I am not saying that you need to change the lights you're using. No, gang, come on. If you guys follow me, you know that I've never been the person that says that ever, right? But what I am saying is pay attention, right? Don't put your head in the sand and pretend that these changes aren't happening. Don't put your head in the sand and pretend that there are not opportunities to learn new ways to do things and to learn new ways to create and to give your images a different feel and a different vibe. That's the important piece. Because once again, there are even more changes coming. Gang, if you look at history, not to sound corny, but I'll go ahead and I'll be the old guy for a minute, right? If you look backwards throughout history and you look like at the Industrial Revolution as an example, okay? And you look at the time period that it took, all of this digital technology we have, from a practical standpoint, in other words, when you could first buy it kind of off the shelf production models, the Nikon D1, we're like just about 20 years in, maybe 21 years almost in. all of this technology is still in its infancy. All of these accessories that we have are in their infancy in terms of their development, in terms of their capabilities. So while so many of us are just use the strobe and this is how we do it, you're actually cutting yourself off at the knees creatively if your philosophy is this is how it's done, end of conversation. Because the fact of the matter is 5 years from now, that's not going to be how it's done. It's just not. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm not trying to do sky is falling. I'm saying, look, if you want to create, if you want to continue to grow, if you want to continue to evolve, and if you don't, then great. But I do. I'm the old guy in the room. It'd be really easy for me to say, oh, this is the way I do it. Screw all that new shit. Why do I want to have to mess with that? It'd make my life a lot easier. But it'd also make my life really boring. And it'd make my photography insanely boring. And I don't mean what somebody thinks of it, because of course there's always that part. I just mean what it would be like doing it. So this is why I pay attention to it. And this is why these changes are important to me. So the point behind that article was the fact that we do have a huge challenge. And to me, there's two solutions, right? Challenge number one is the fact that you can't easily compare speedlights, strobes, and LEDs in terms of how powerful is it. Watt seconds are a misnomer. The fact of the matter is, if you went out and got a Godox 8600, an Edelman 600 watt second flash, a Profoto 600 watt second flash, and you line them all up, set them at the same power, you would get different exposures from each one of them. Because there's the efficiencies in the tube, meaning how powerful is the actual tube, how is the tube treated in terms of how it's going to maintain color quality. There's all kind of variables that go into play. The 600 watts is just the power that's being pushed through the capacitor. That's all it is. But that does not reflect the power of the tube and the amount of light being generated. So even within watt seconds, it's not a legitimate comparison, right? If you're looking at a Godox 8200, 8400, and 8600 in the same line, it's a legitimate comparison to say that the 400 is one stop more powerful than the 200, and the 600 is one stop more powerful than the 400, or two stops more powerful than the 200. That's a reasonable thing to say. But can you compare them across brands? No, you can't. So how do you know which one's actually the most powerful? You don't, unless you get your hands on them and you try them. Unfortunately, we do not have a system that is accessible to all photographers and easily understood that we can make those comparisons. And then, of course, the fact of the matter is a flash fires at like 1/8,000th of a second or faster. So the shutter speed when using a flash doesn't really matter as far as getting the correct exposure on the flash. The shutter speed's only impacting the ambient light that's in the scene. And usually with a flash, the ambient light is not a problem. But then when you switch to LEDs, you can't determine by watt seconds and make a fair comparison because the light would have to be on for a full second and strobes aren't on for a full second. So again, engineers can work it all out, period, okay? And from Eric, don't talk to me about T1 times. Eric, you're always in the weeds, man. You're always in the weeds. T1 times help determine how well a strobe can freeze motion. Have you noticed anything similar with constant lights like the Stella Pros and say lumens? No, Eric. It's a constant light, so how could you have a T1 time? But see, the problem is, Eric, this is the trouble with getting in the weeds. This is my whole point behind this article. You guys got to read this article. Like, it's time to forget all that crap. My sincere advice, photographers, forget watt seconds. Forget guide numbers. Forget T1. Forget all that shit. Because it's not helping you, right? Let's forget lighting for a second, gang. And Eric, you especially, let's forget lighting for a second. How do we stop action? We use a faster shutter speed. So if you have a constant light that's always on, how are you going to stop the action? With a faster shutter speed. So Part of the point that I'm trying to make to you guys is that moving over to constant light sources actually makes things easier. Now, there's a good point to put a needle in right there. Are strobes going to go away? No, of course not. Is everything going to be completely LED? No, of course not. Well, if LEDs are so good, Joe, will there be a demand for flash? Absolutely. Flash tends to be more powerful than LEDs for now. That could change, I'm sure, as things evolve. But as it stands right now, if you're going to be one of those photographers that insists you have to be able to go out and you have to overpower the sun at noon, you know, if you're going to be one of those zombie people, then yes, strobe is still the name of the game. I actually state that in the article. Okay. You're not going to do that stuff with LEDs. But if you're a photographer that wants to work with the light that's in your scene, and then you want to enhance it, you want to create with it, you want to add to it, you want to manipulate it, LED is a million times easier than working with strobes. Coming from a guy who, I'll do anything you want me to do with a strobe. I'll do anything. You guys see what I can do with lighting. But give me a choice, man, I'm doing it with LEDs because I can see it. I turn it on, I can see it. Boom. It doesn't get any easier than that. So the irony of it is for those of you that don't have a lot of experience and who struggle with lighting, you actually make your learning curve harder with strobes. You have been. We all have been. It's easier to learn with the constant light because it's right there all the time. Because what do? We set lights up, probably based on some YouTube video, and then we do a test shot and we look at a little 3-inch screen because not enough of you tether. So if you tether and you're looking at it on a big screen, okay, that's cool. But then also if you're doing that, hopefully you have slowed yourself down and you're paying attention and you're not missing details and you're not missing bad shadows and highlights and reflections and that kind of stuff. But when you're looking at the back of a camera LCD or looking at the EVF, it's way too easy to miss that stuff. When you're working with constant lights and you simply stand there and you look at whatever it is you're photographing, there's the light. There it is. That's what you're photographing. Done. It's all right in front of you. So it's much easier to see any issues that you have with your lighting. Again, go a year or two back, the argument was LEDs not bright enough. LEDs can't stop action because they're not bright enough. Those things are changing. I mean, we even saw a couple years ago, we saw Rotolite came out with really, really odd design, but they had that, what was it? The Neo that had the high-speed sync, flash built into it and all that kind of stuff. But it was this ridiculously like small round light that you couldn't modify it right. And it wasn't that bright. It was kind of useless, really, right? But kind of a cool concept, right? It's like a hybrid, putting those things together. Who's to say we won't see that? Who's to see that we're not going to see some kind of amazing innovation down the pike that actually allows us to have that ability to freeze super high speed action or to, because keep in mind, there's another problem with flash that if you don't shoot events, you probably never run into this, right? But for you event photographers, if you're shooting something and, even a wedding reception, there's a lot of action going on and you're shooting heavy, you run into the problem where you've got to wait for a flash to recycle. You run into the problem where the flash can overheat. All those kinds of things. In fact, and then, if you get too crazy and you're laying on that shutter button, maybe your camera's capable of doing 15 frames a second. Well, guess what? 15 frames a second, your flash is probably not going to keep up with you. I don't know too many that will. So you're missing frames. You're shooting away, but you're missing frames. Or you're not able to shoot because your flash overheated. You got to let it cool down. Or because your flash is recycling. I don't think any of you have instant recycle time. Well, gosh, an LED never recycles, right? Does it? It's always there. It's always on. So you never miss anything. That's why you do see more and more event photographers and wedding photographers working with LEDs, right? So again, gang, if this is causing you stress, here's what I would recommend to some of you. For those of you that are like, you're the ones that probably actually need to pay the most attention to what I'm talking about. Because it says to me that you're afraid of change. It says to me that you are not open to trying new things and not learning. And again, I'm not saying you got to go do it today. Nobody said that. Not at all. But I'm saying, hey, learn this stuff. Understand the opportunities. Understand the potential. Sadly, photographers, and you know what? I was guilty of this many years ago. Sadly, photographers tend to deal with lighting as an afterthought. It's like, I need lighting. What can I afford? That's like the wrong way to go about it, right? When you're like buying cameras, you say, I need a camera. What can I afford? Yeah, there are some people that are going to do that because in their situation, that's all they can get. But if you're getting to the point where you're an advanced amateur or a professional, you're not going to say, I need a camera. What can I afford? That's not how you do stuff. That's not how you are successful in business. A couple questions here that I see from Larry. Are LED only appropriate if you use mirrorless? How to use them with DSLR and light mirror? So, Larry, LEDs are appropriate for anything. Okay. The reason why I kind of add mirrorless into that piece of the conversation is because of the WYSIWYG aspect of mirrorless, where we're seeing the finished result in the camera, which of course, the only difference is with the DSLR, you're going to take the picture and then you're going to chimp, right? You're going to, look at the back of the camera, press play, and you're going to look at the image. For those of you that don't know what chimp means or where that comes from, the best example I could give you, are we in basketball season now? I think we are. But when there's an NBA game on at some point, watch 5 minutes of the game. And all you got to do is watch one of the players run down the court on a breakaway and dunk the ball. And before the camera cuts away, they'll stay there long enough on that camera shot. Look at all the photographers that are sitting on the floor right at the end line of the basketball court, and it will look like a row of monkeys that go, and they're checking, hence chimp. That's where that phrase came from, okay? So it's basically previewing your image. That's the only difference in terms of what you're going to do, Larry. So it still is going to, again, allow you more capabilities in terms of being able to mix light, in terms of the way you kind of create your light. So, Larry, if you're a DSLR shooter, I would say to you, honestly, one of the biggest things that you should put into making the decision to even consider LEDs today or tomorrow would be the idea of what's your knowledge base, with lighting, and how much do you have invested in strobes? If you haven't really started to dive into the lighting arena yet, then I would be the first to tell you, focus on LEDs, start paying attention to some of the things that are happening with LEDs and some of the changes that we're seeing and some of the new gear, because yes, they are becoming more powerful. They are becoming more functional. They have many added features. They just give you a lot more, potential. Okay. Don Bender, pardon my ignorance. That's okay. Are LED lights constantly on? And then even when not actually taking a shot? Yeah, it's like turning on a light bulb, Don. So that's exactly the point. It is a constant light source. It doesn't turn off. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? From TC, I was having trouble with my LEDs blinding my subjects. It was hard for me to know how to place them and not be in the frame. Yes, I like LEDs, but flash is easier when I have to be quick. We'll see. So let's take that backwards. Flash is easier when I have to be quick. I would actually have to completely disagree with that, TNC. I'm not sure how you see flash as being easier when you're quick, because with LEDs, you turn it on, you see it, you shoot, boom, done. It's there, right? Now, as far as the blinding your subject thing, I kind of addressed that without addressing it before. Meaning, if you're not using a more powerful LED, and if you're going to try and shoot at lowest ISOs, then yeah, you're going to be in, or excuse me, forget what I said about powerful LED. If you're going to try and shoot at lowest ISOs, you're going to have to turn the power of your LED up. And then if that LED is placed close to the subject, then it's going to blind them. turn the LED down, turn your ISO up, and you also gain shutter speed by doing that, and then you're good to go, right? That's the key. And even with grandkids, TC, I use LEDs when I shoot my grandkids, 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, about to turn 7-year-old. They don't wait for nothing. And I use LEDs for that because, again, I would disagree with your thought process. I find the LED faster because when I turn the flash on, I still don't know what I'm getting. I don't know what I'm getting until I take a test shot, and then I look at the result or wait for the camera to show me the result. When I turn the LED on, the minute I put the camera up to my eye, I know exactly what I'm getting from that LED. There's no wait. There's no lag time. I don't have to take a shot to see it. So I'm able to, even if I'm chasing hit, I'm able to adjust that exposure on the fly so that by the time I press the button, I'm dialed in and I've got the right exposure. So I again, your thinking is and I don't mean it to be insulting at all, but I would refer to it as kind of more old school thinking. If you would have talked to me 5 years ago, I would have said exactly the same thing, TNC. I would have said, yeah, strobe is going to be the way to get it done. Absolutely. 5 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. In fact, you can see the videos that I did 4 years ago, and the conversation was LEDs are cool. They're going to get neater, but they weren't ready. Here we are 4 years down the road, and that's why I'm, talking to you and saying otherwise. It's like they've changed dramatically. Mickey Stein, what would the white balance be for LED lights? You deal with white balance the same way you deal with strobes, right? Most LED lights that are on the market, like the Stella Pro Lights that I use, or if you buy the Savage LED lights, or if you buy the specular lights you see back here, or even like the GVM lights, almost any of them, they're 5600K, right? So you can set your white balance to 5600K, match the light, boom. That's what I do when I'm shooting flash. When I'm in the studio, and this might be a little tip for you guys that are trying to do some studio work, by the way. So I had somebody talk to me about this week. When I'm in the studio, I never use auto white balance, ever. Have you guys looked at my pictures, all those bright colored backgrounds? So keep in mind, all those bright color backgrounds are going to impact the way the camera interprets white balance, right? So skin tone could wind up like, Wicked Witch green if I'm using some crazy colored background. So I always set my white balance based on the light, and that applies LEDs or strobes, doesn't matter. So one of the nice things, again, 5600K, I don't have a Godox here, but the Godox 8200s, 5600K, boom. So they're all the same. The only time I work auto white balance, and I love auto white balance, what the cameras can do today with auto white balance is amazing, but it's still a computer, right? So, you have to look at it in the sense of it's still going to get tricked. Pruish J, here's a great question. I have a Godox 8600. If LEDs are the future, Joe, do I have to get rid of it or can I still combine it with LEDs? Awesome question. And the answer is no to the first part. You don't have to get rid of it. Remember, I'm not trying to spend anybody's money. Relax, everybody. Can you combine it? Sure, you can combine an incandescent light bulb in a scene. Like right now, I'm combining an LED panel. I'm combining that, LED strip light. You can combine all kinds of things. You guys see me combining television screens and all kinds of things, right? Light is light. Now, obviously, different light sources will have different properties and potentially different color balances. But can you mix different lights? Oh my God, guys, I've done shots where I'm using, more recently since I've kind of switched over, where I'm using LEDs, but I'll use a set of strobes in the background to be able to blow out the background, or because I want to use a really rich colored gel, and I know that rich colored gel is going to just take a ton of light out of it, so I'll use strobes back there. I combine them. I have no qualms combining them whatsoever. And I think, kind of like, I mentioned the rotolight thing, which believe me, I am not a fan of that. I would not encourage anybody to get that. Kind of a neat idea, but unfortunately, I don't think they did it right. I really don't. But the idea of having kind of that hybrid, mix Makes all the sense in the world. That's essentially what I'm talking about, when I was using this example here with, being able to mix, all the ambient light, but still have white lighting. I mean, again, that's actually kind of a hybrid approach to the way we think about lighting, because if you just blow a flash into all that, everything goes white, you lose all the color, right? So you lose all of that wonderful impact of what your eyes are seeing and experiencing. Because especially in an event like that, that's what you want to be able to record and preserve, right? So it's a great question, Jay, and you can absolutely, um, you can absolutely combine the two. From M, the downside for LED is that you can use it only as off-camera flash. I mean, there are no on-camera LEDs yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're actually very wrong. M. There are loads of LEDs that have hot shoe bases on them. Loads. So depends on how powerful you want, what kind of light you're trying to create. But yeah, there's all kind of little Loom Cube makes a ton. Even the little spiffy here, the Q6, the LED straps actually have a hot shoe mount. Yeah, but the other thing to that, that I would kind of toss back to that though, Em, is how many of you and how often are you actually using on-camera flash? On camera, I mean, yeah, there are times, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, um, on-camera flash is not the most interesting light in the world. It's kind of boring and it's kind of flat. So it's really not something that we're going to do much of anyway. But yeah, there are loads of LEDs that you can go ahead and put on a camera. Okay. Let's see here. And let me scroll. So Don asked that question. Larry asked about the DSLRs. We talked about blinding subjects. So from Charlie L here, I've been using 3 bicolor LED panels for almost 2 years, but usually only for product type shots in a light 24-inch cube tent or video work. I'm waiting for new LED lights to come out before buying more. Yeah, I mean, so obviously we're at a point now where new LED lights are coming out every day, but certainly one of the things that's nice about kind of where the LED lights are evolving to is, for me, and at least this is, my approach to it. One of the things that attracted me to these Stella lights, I'm not trying to pitch the Stella lights. They're not sponsoring this. I am sponsored by Stella. I use them. But what attracted me to these, and it's actually, this was Joe not being very smart or very polite for that matter. This, I think, was 2 years ago. I was in Cleveland, Ohio at the Pixel Photo Fest. And Scott Robert Lim, who has been a guest on my Talk Chat show, he's a Sony artisan. He is also a champion of light with Stella Pro. He was doing a photo walk outside the venue. We were in the athletic center at Cleveland State College, and he was doing a photo walk, and he had one of these set up with an umbrella, and he had a model, and he was talking. And they had food trucks at the event for lunch, right? So I had gone out to the food truck, I got some lunch, and I was walking back into the hall, and I kept seeing this light. And I was looking at this light, and I could see the light that it was putting on his subjects. And this is outside. This is like high noon. And I was like, whoa, like, what is that? So literally, without really thinking about what I was doing, I just kind of really walked right smack into the middle of Scott's photo walk that he was doing and started asking him questions like, what is that light? Where'd it come from? Who makes it? And that's actually how I met Scott. But yeah, I mean, for me, what this gives me is 1, a powerful light. 2, the ability to use all of the same modifiers that I had been using with strobe. Because just like a lot of you were getting stressed listening to me talk earlier, I wanted to be able to start using LEDs without having to get all new modifiers and without having to kind of rethink the way that I think about modifying the light. I was excited about rethinking my approach to lighting and having constant light, but I didn't want to have to relearn how to modify light. Because the problem, like with the light panels, like were mentioned before, with the light panels, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of these little LED point light sources. That's not, you could have a big 24-inch light panel, and if you don't diffuse it, it's not the same as having a softbox that's 24 inches. Not the same at all. It's much harsher light, right? So it's not that you can't do good light with them, but you have to handle the light differently. That's the challenge. And I was being a little bit lazy, but also practical, right? I've got thousands of dollars invested in modifiers, and I've got years of experience using those modifiers. So I wanted to be able to transition and take advantage of the best features of LED without having to replace all of that and without having to change the way I thought about modifiers. So, okay. Let's see here. I just saw another question come in, and where did it go? Scrolling back up. From Jay again. Are LEDs strong enough for bigger light modifiers? I have been thinking of buying LEDs for video as well, but I was worried about getting flashes for pics as well. But with this, I may not need to. The reason I'm asking is because I still shoot with a crop sensor. So the crop sensor, Jay, has nothing to do with it at all. Jay, I shoot with micro four thirds. Have you seen my pictures? Just saying. Okay. The one thing nobody has ever said about my pictures, maybe they don't like my style, maybe they don't think I'm that good, but nobody's ever said that my pictures are technically lacking when it comes to anything that's got to do with sensor size. Right? So sensor size got nothing to do with this conversation at all. Okay. Keep in mind, the new iPhone 13 that was just announced. Look how big that sensor is, and look at what they're doing with like no light. So again, that's why we've got to get away from the way we've been thinking about ISO, because all this ISO stuff, it's software. The software is getting really good. So yes, it's important to know what your base ISO is. Yes, it's important to know that's always going to be the best quality, but it's also important to know, so if I go one stop from 100 to 200 or one stop from 200 to 400, how much quality difference am I, sacrificing? And you're going to realize that it's almost next to nothing. Okay. So, but anyway, to go back to your question, are they big enough, strong enough for bigger light modifiers? It really depends on a couple of things. So the way that you can't look at this, Jay, and any of you, don't look at the idea, is the light big enough for the modifier? You have to look at two levels to that question. So I want to stick with what you're trying to ask me, but you're missing a key component. That's the inverse square law. Sorry, but it is. So what you have to add to your question, Jay, is the light big enough for a big modifier? And of course, I need to know how big, but we'll get back to that. At X number of feet. Yeah, if you're going to put an LED light in, like a 48-inch octabox and set it 15 feet away from your subject, you need to be okay raising your ISO, because you're going to raise your ISO compared to what you do with a flash. Absolutely. If you're going to put an LED into a 4-foot octabox, my first question is, what is the angle of spread from the LED? Which, by the way, is also a question you have to ask for flash. It's just nobody pays attention to. I could go online right now, and unfortunately I get sued for copyright, but we could go through Instagram. We could go through those social media profiles like ISO 2000, okay, magazine, where they show all the behind the scenes pictures, all that kind of stuff. And I could show you setup after setup after setup after setup where the photographers are not getting the kind of light that they think they're getting. But here's the beauty. It doesn't make their picture bad. It just means that when you look at what they're doing and you factor in the inverse square law, they're actually not using the boxes and the gear the way it was designed to be working. If they intended to do it, good for them. In all likelihood, they didn't actually really know, but they still got good light. And that's the point at the end. It's about what is the finished result. So really, Jay, that equation you're dealing with is a matter of, how far away is that box going to be? How big a spread? What degree is the spread of the light from the source that you have, and or can that be modified? Can it be made to spread wider? So like with the Stella Pros, they have what they call different optics that can be placed on the front of them. Am I going to be able to get this off while I'm sitting here without dropping it? Probably not. Oh yeah, I can. Okay. So, that's the actual chip. This is like a diffusion dome that's going to spread the light faster and quicker. So if I'm going to put this inside a softbox, my 26-inch Photox Raja that you guys see me use all the time. You see it in all my Instagram posts and that. This is what's going to be on this light inside because it's easily going to fill that octabox when I do it. So those inverse square law things, unfortunately, is what you have to factor in as well to answer that question, okay? Mike T, what LED would you recommend to replace my AD400? Mike, that's not the question to ask. You're asking the wrong question, okay? You can't compare an LED to a flash. Stop. Read the article that I shared the link to. Please, all of you, read the article. You can't make that comparison. That is not the question to be asking, okay? What you have to look at, Mike, is what do you shoot and how do you shoot it? What do you need the light to do for you? Okay. And then we can determine, is an LED or any specific LED, is it capable of handling that? I mean, literally, gang, what I'm proposing to all of you, if photographers would start to think this way, it also puts more pressure on the lighting manufacturers to write their spec sheets this way. Okay. So, and I'm going to be able to share a little bit more about that in a couple of weeks, that little piece there about encouraging lighting manufacturers to do things a little bit different in the way they present information to us. There's a project that I've been working on that I'm really excited to share with, but I can't share it until the end of the month. And I will give you guys all the breakdown on it. But if we get the lighting manufacturers to present the information a little bit differently, then it becomes a lot easier for us photographers to look at a light and say, yes, that's going to do what I need. Because all these power numbers that we're used to, all these guide numbers, I mean, I hope you all realize that when you see guide numbers for a speed light, it's the biggest scam ever. Because the problem of it is every manufacturer measures at a different distance or a different zoom level. There's all these variables. So a guide number isn't a guide number, isn't a guide number. One unit could be a guide number of 85, the next unit could be a guide number of 100, and they're both the same power unit. But the company that's putting out the guide number 101, they tweaked the equation to their benefit so that their flash would seem more powerful. And it's not. So it's a joke, right? It's a completely joke. And you've been buying your lights this way for how long? Same with the watt seconds thing. Most of you didn't buy your lights because you understood, and I'm not trying to be mean, but let's just keep it real. Most of you didn't buy those Godox 8400s or 8600s because you actually knew what 600 watt seconds meant or 400 watt seconds meant. You bought them because your favorite YouTuber or favorite Instagrammer posted picture after picture after picture after picture using that light. Just saying. So now go back and look at the receipt. Look at how much you spent on that light without actually knowing what you were getting. Keep it real. I'm trying to propose to you a different way of thinking so that we get past that. And so that we also realize that we can do so much more with lighting, right? So Wayne says here, so I'm sorry, wait a second. Let me go back to Mike. I apologize. And I know I'm running over time. I'll get these last couple questions. Mike, what you need to be looking at, and I'm going to talk more about this. By the way, gang, the next month. So the next 4 episodes after today, so it's going to be a total of 5 episodes of The Last Frame. All about lighting. We're going deep on lighting, okay? And about LEDs and all that stuff, okay? I am determined to, at least those of you that follow me, I am determined to get you to a point where you really understand what we're talking about, not stuck in the weeds, not like an engineer. Leave that stuff to the engineers. Leave all the mathematical equations and the alphabet stuff and the squiggly lines. Leave that to the engineers. Let's be photographers and let's focus on creating images and creating interesting images, things that are different, things that are ours, right? So I don't want to make you like me. I don't want you to do what I do. I want you to do what you imagine, not what you saw on YouTube, not what you saw on Instagram. That's what I want to help you do, okay? So let's see. Wayne, cameras have developed hugely recently and everybody wants the best. Why would you not want to accept lighting advancements from dual temp to RGBW? Yeah, I mean, there's going to be tons of lighting advancements, Wayne. Tons. There's some really, really cool stuff coming for sure, okay? From Jay, what would you recommend as a minimum or a light as an example in a scenario where you use a 45-inch octa on a 45-degree angle? Jay, I'm not going to answer your question because you're really not getting my point. I promise you, Jay, come back for the next several episodes, and I will demystify it for you. I am going to work crazy hard to demystify it. I'm really serious. Like, when I was given the opportunity to write this article for Petapixel, and I do hope that you guys will go check it out. It's a start. It will make sense to a lot of you. And I want to be really clear. Some of you, you're still going to be a little confused. You're not stupid. Seriously, you are not stupid. This is as close to getting into the weeds as Joe ever gets with this stuff, right? But it's important information to be able to really understand, what are you spending money on, okay? Because I have a feeling, and Jay, we'll talk more if you come back, but I have a feeling that even your 45-inch box at 45 degrees, 2 meters away, I have a feeling that you're using that in a way that you don't need to be using it. You could probably use a much smaller light source, in which case you don't need as powerful light and all kinds of things. So, I still need to know more about what you're doing, Jay. I'm not going to try and answer your question because I still don't know that the way you're setting your light up makes sense. Because believe me, lighting, gang, it's a lot like Photoshop. You go into Photoshop, there's like 50 different ways you can do almost everything, right? Lighting's the same way. There's no one right way. The only thing that anybody really cares about is, what's the finished result, right? That's it. They don't care about any of these numbers. They don't care about any of these comparisons. They don't care how much your gear costs. They don't care any of that stuff. So, I know, like, for some of you, this is a little overwhelming. This is a little crazy. But if you'll give me a couple more episodes, I promise you, we're going to break it down. I'm going to show you some examples. We're going to use some of that 3D software. We'll create some scenarios to show you some of the differences. For those of you that may be a little bit newer to me, go back a couple months, and I did several weeks about light modifiers. And during those several weeks, on the last frame here, during those several weeks that we were doing light modifiers, I taught you a lot of little tricks with the inverse square law and things like that. And we talked about kind of the placement of lights and where you really need to place them as opposed to where people tend to place them and why you should consider those things. So I would encourage you, if you can find the time, go back and watch those, because they'll also help you a little bit as we go forward here. But again, nobody has to go spend any money. If your lights are working for you, that's awesome. All I want you to do, open your mind, be aware. There are some incredible creative opportunities available to us right now, today, as photographers. And there's even more right around the corner. As they sometimes say, it's about to get real, gang. Like, really, really serious. We're going to see some amazing technology advancements in the next year, and especially in the next 5 years. I guarantee it. Even a couple of months ago, I talked to you about AI software for culling and editing, and I interviewed one company on TalkChat. Do you realize in the last week, I'm not exaggerating, in the last week, I've been contacted by 4 other companies doing similar things with their software that all, of course, would love for me to interview and we'll talk about it. So the fact is, this stuff is coming hot and heavy. And you don't have to run out and buy all of it. But at the same time, if you don't pay attention to it, you're very likely going to be missing out on something that maybe you should be buying because it's going to save you time, it's going to save you money, or it's actually going to make your photography better. So that's my point. So please read the article. If you're in any camera clubs or that thing, also too, do me a solid, right? If you're in any camera clubs, at the top of the article on Petapixel, hit the Facebook share button, share it with your cohorts in your camera clubs, please. Let's get the word out and let's get a little bit of a movement going, because honestly, my goal is I want to put pressure on equipment manufacturers, number one, to use standards, and number two, to make it easier for us as photographers, even me, to understand, what am I really buying? What's it going to do for me? It's really not that hard for them to do that. It's really, really not. But we also have to come to expect it, and we have to talk to these companies and let them know that we want it. So have a great week, gang. If you watched on Facebook, thank you so much. If I missed any of your questions or comments, I'm sorry. I'm still working on getting the Facebook thing tied together here, but I'll get better at it. Even if you're watching the recorded version, if you haven't already, use the comments below the video or to the side on Facebook. Let me know you were here. Let me know where you're watching from. And you know the drill, gang. Go pick up that damn camera and shoot something. Because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios. Have a great week. Take care.